I would like to think, on one level or another, that we're all becoming aware of the negative impacts that are happening on our surrounding environment and nature. But how do we begin to acknowledge that within ourselves? How do we begin to navigate our emotions to avoid overwhelm so that we can get to a place where we can actually do something about it? This is exactly what I explored with Shona Hunter, who's the community organiser at the WA Forest Alliance. Shona brings her wealth of experience of working in this area and the hours that she's given to this cause for us to go through this tricky journey from a real personal point of view, so that we can begin to get to a place, like I said, where we can start to process our own emotions and consider and open up to the potential actions that we can take to help in these areas. So enjoy Shona.
I just want to start by acknowledging that we're on Whadjuk Noongar country, and that sovereignty was never ceded, and that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and that the Aboriginal people of Australia were the first activists in Australia fighting for their country and their children and their freedom, and that fight exists today, and they're activists of the past and the current activists of the present and the ones that are emerging. I'd like to just acknowledge those as well.
Hello and welcome back to WA Real. After that wonderful welcome to country, I'd like to welcome Shona Hunter to the show. Shona, welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure actually. I'm looking forward to this. Yeah.
Good, good. I hope so.
Yeah.
So you're community organiser for the WA Forest Alliance, which is an umbrella organisation that, what does it do? Help provide support to other small groups and initiatives who centre around the forest concerns.
Yeah, I think lessons, not so much support, but more that we all have the common interest of protecting the southwest forests, the native forests in the southwest, and that there's the recognition that there's lots of individuals and community groups throughout the southwest that have been working for this aim, the full protection for, like nearly 40 years now, and longer for some other people. And so we work together in a kind of in a crossroads kind of way where we help each other out, and we share the same aims. Yeah, so we amplify each other's voices, and it's movement building stuff.
So I first came across this issue when I went to see the film Cry of the Forest.
Powerful film.
Yeah, it made things very very clear, straight to the point.
Yeah. It's impacted a lot of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's raised bigger questions which I wanted to dive into today with you. But I guess, today's not about recanting the film. I would highly recommend people go and see that. But at a top level, for somebody who's not seen it, can you give us like the summary of the major points? So we can set the scene.
Yeah, so the film covers off the major threats to the southwest forests, and there are many and varied, and it really highlights that the forests are under assault from many different angles all throughout the southwest. It's not just logging that threatens the forests.
Yes.
And also that
there's the mining of bauxite.
There's the mining of bauxite, there's dieback, and there's also the effects of climate change, and that's having an effect on, it's drought affecting the forests in the southwest, and it's reducing the amount of rainfall available for, trees that are used to having, a much higher rainfall, and so they're not growing as tall, and they're drought affected.
Yes.
Yeah, so it also kind of does a really beautiful way of demonstrating how the different parts of the movement to protect the native forests and the people involved, and the different ways that we've worked really hard as a community to bring this issue to public awareness, and also to the awareness of decision makers. And it also demonstrates all the beauty and the magnificence and the incredible variety of values that forests have intrinsically for themselves, just because they exist as forests, but also for the role that they play in sustaining life on Earth and life for people. Yeah,
I think as well as the obvious message that comes through in the film, like the drone footage across the forest is just stunning.
Yeah.
And I was also struck by the diversity of people that the film covers who are moved to action on this issue, whether it's the the highly professional doctor couple that went and bought the land
to do the agroforestry.
Yeah, to do the agroforestry, through to the grannies, which was just enough to bring a tear to your eye.
Yeah. Bananas taking direct action in the forest.
Yeah, the grannies out there with their knitting in the middle of the night. It was just stunning to people doing the chaining themselves to things and all sorts of things. It wasn't just one sort of
demographic
is the word I was looking for. It wasn't just one demographic of people. It was a variety of people, all moved by this one issue.
And we've worked really hard to demonstrate, or we didn't even need to work hard. It's in its nature. This movement is an apolitical movement. There are so many people across so many demographics that understand that it's absolutely ludicrous to keep cutting down native forests. There's actually no need for it. And the film also does a really good job of demonstrating how it's been happening at a financial loss, and taxpayers are funding this.
That was the. So I come from a business consulting background, and that's the bit that I just found shocking. In the fact that there's this industry which is supported by the WA government
and the WA taxpayers,
and therefore the WA taxpayers. And it's running at a loss. So
and the forests belong to us in the first place.
Yeah, so it's like net loss all across the board.
Yeah.
We're losing the nature, and we're losing money.
Right, and there's so much more economic value in keeping them standing.
Yes.
Because for tourism and beekeeping and recreation and all the other, values, social values that forests play a role in our economy for that is. They're worth far more standing financially and also for their other benefits as well. And the film also does a really good job of demonstrating how it's forests are really needed to help mitigate climate change. They're actually, the byline of the film is, can we save the forests in time for them to save us? Because we need that carbon drawdown. It's absolutely essential to keep every single forest intact across the whole globe if we are going to fight.
Not just ours, all of them. But this is ours on our doorstep.
This is ours,
And I think particularly when you saw the map of what was there and what is in place now.
Oh, yeah.
That's scary.
Stark, and also what's left available for logging.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
More than half of what's left.
Yes, is available for logging. So I guess what I wanted to ask was, because the issue around our forest is clear and present, and yet there are so many other issues of the same ilk, whether
environmental
it's
issues,
climate related issues,
biodiversity loss issues.
But then also just how we're treating fellow men issues. So there's all these
social justice issues.
Social justice issues, all of them. How do you go about placing your issue in the marketplace of other issues that are all screaming for attention? How have you guys gone about actually capturing the attention of everyday folk towards this? Because this is what I find. I could go and watch Cry of the Forest, and then I could come home and put Netflix on and watch Seaspiracy, and then I could go and watch something else, and all of a sudden it's like bang, 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 bang.
It's quite overwhelming.
Fuck, it's overload.
Yeah.
So I guess
that sends a lot of people into apathy because they're just like, I can't deal.
We'll probably come into that in a minute, people's reaction. But I guess, how do you actually even go about placing this issue in the marketplace of issues, if that's...
I think we haven't deliberately done that. I don't think we've needed to, because there has been such an affinity, like such a natural drawing for West Australians to really support their forests or the forests. And I think it's part of you know, who we are as West Australians. The Southwest Native Forests make up childhood memories. They make up so much of our holiday time. They make up so much of what we value about where we live, that it's a natural thing for people to want to save them. So we haven't had to compete in the marketplace of issues, so to speak. And we've never seen it like that, and we've never deliberately tried to be competitive, I guess. It's just naturally occurred that the movement has drawn thousands upon thousands of people. And I think what makes people stay is that there's a few things.
That's an interesting thing. Not just be aware, but then stay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people that are drawn and can really understand the issue and are totally on side with the movement. But then the reason why the movement is so mobilised and so active, I think it comes from, you know, the 40 years of legacy that this was, you know, the Western Australia's environmental movement of movements was founded upon the forest movement. You know, and some of the biggest wins that we've had in environmental, you know, spaces has been for forests historically in Western Australia. So we have this legacy of many, many campaigners and activists and individuals and decision makers that have come before us who've really worked really hard and made really set the whole movement up. It's got time behind it. It's got history behind it.
Yeah, it has momentum.
Yeah, and it's also that history is really founded in some beautiful roots of non-violence and deep respect for working with people and decision makers. And we've got a great rapport with decision makers. You know, we work together with them when we're not working against the workers. We're trying to find solutions through developing the Forest for Life transition plan, which gives the workers, you know, the way out of a dying industry. And the government's not doing that, but we've developed a plan which means that these people are not left behind and communities are not left behind.
Yes.
So we're inclusive.
Like we saw, I'm from England originally, so like we saw with the coal industry where the coal mine shuts down.
And then where do these people go? They've got no money and no, you know, livelihoods, and all the regional economies.
Gone and
yeah, exactly. And the regional economies that really rely on that, you know, local expenditure of those workers also suffers.
Yes.
And so we've developed a transition plan, which is really, you know, the state government's job to do that. But you know, we've self-funded that, the research into that plan. So this is all about making sure that we have a solution, but also including everybody's needs and having this way of working where there's mutual respect. And yeah, we've got that behind us, and that's from, you know, decades of really, really strong relationships. And then I think the next thing that I'd like to say about why people are drawn and stay in the movement is that there's a couple of things. Next is that we have an action plan. We give people things that are very specific, very measurable, and very achievable. And that feeling of when you see the film and you see the destruction and you start to edge into that overwhelm and apathy, the panacea for that is action. And you need to be able to take action that you see is actually going to make a difference in order for you to feel like you have some control and power over the issue.
Yes.
And that's as an individual, we want to be empowered to do something about
feel like we can do something.
That it's possible that we can make change. And that brings me to the next thing, is that it's absolutely possible. It's absolutely achievable. It's not something that's so far out of reach, like, you know, ending, you know, the gas industry in Western Australia. Like, that's a massive transition and a massive ask. But transitioning, you know, 350 jobs and a loss-making industry is a really easy win.
Yes.
With massive global benefits. It doesn't just benefit the local wildlife and the local people and the local forests and our rainfall. It also has global benefits. And I think that that's what's so attractive about it, is that in our backyard we've got this low-hanging climate, climate action fruit.
Yes.
That we can actually pick and eat and do right now.
And feel good, like we've got a sense of momentum into this thing.
And because we've had buy-in with decision makers, like we're making progress because it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'll come to that in a minute. Is there almost like a path that you see when somebody encounters this for the first time? It was like a personal journey that they might go through. Because I've had a previous guest quite a few years ago who was a Jungian analyst. We talked about dealing with the trauma of being aware of our impact on the environment, and how that people open up for a moment and then go, whoa, that's too much. And that's me, and I'm doing all of it, and then snap, and then I'm going to get out of this. Yeah. Because it's all just too murky and too much for me to sit with. So is there sort of a pattern that you see with or paths that you see people go through when they first interact with this and as they, start to go further into this issue?
That's a really good question. And I think that the people begin their journey in this movement in lots of different ways. Yeah. Because it's such a dynamic and what's the word? Dynamic and varied campaign. Like there's so many different ways you can get involved.
Subjective things that trigger you in to start with.
So, and also I'm as a community organizer, I've been really pushing this idea of being, radically self-responsible and empowered to do what you can do in your own area of influence. Yes. So rather than trying to worry about the solution and fixing the problem, just look at what's around you and how you can make influence in the area around you.
Because that's an easy route to bypass out, isn't it? It's like, oh, the problem's so enormous. Yeah. There's no way I can do anything. Like,
too hard.
Check, I'm out.
Yeah. So I have these conversations around like what's possible given your own lifestyle, given your own capacity, given your own availability, and given your area of influence and what you do on a day-to-day basis, what's possible for you. And sometimes it's a conversation, and that's powerful. Yeah. You talk to the right person and you can really make a difference. Yeah. And sometimes it's writing a letter, and sometimes it's, putting on a film screening at your kid's school. Yeah. Or sometimes it's donating money because, you trust in this grassroots organisation that's been around for 30 years. And you want to see it
cash rich, time poor person.
Exactly. And that's,
Yeah. Because I think the reason why I ask is because I think it's important because there's so many issues out there, in that it can be an overwhelm, and then it's easy to then all of a sudden become aware of an environmental issue, particularly one that's right on your doorstep. It's one thing talking about a floating island of plastic in the Pacific, which is on the other side of the world to us, right?
It's not really relatable right now.
Yeah, and that's where you get this sort of, well, it should be. Right. It should. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, I can relate, but
but then we've got something that's really close to home, forest in the southwest, and then you get that sort of dawn of awakening of like, oh fuck, I and everyone else are treading really heavily on the land, and we're making an impact directly, indirectly. This is going on, and then you can be concerned, confused, angry, outraged. All of these emotions can be released, and then you don't know what to do with it. And then if somebody appears to know a whole lot more about this and you don't, and so it's like, well, I don't, and then you can be embarrassed, and it's like all this little it's like I'm interested in like the personal journey to have a discussion around that, because if we can normalize an acceptance to say, look, I didn't know about this, and that's okay. Not like, oh, you didn't know about the forest, oh dear, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you didn't know, well...
Where have you been?
Where have you been?
Yeah.
You've just been living in your own little world. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, shame's not going to help
No.
right here.
No.
Shame is only going to throw people further
Yeah.
and further away. So it's almost like it always needs to be like this accepting cushion of like, you didn't know. Okay, all right, come in. Tell us what you know. Tell us what you don't
Yeah.
know. And it's okay that you don't know, but it's great that you do now.
Yeah.
And we recognise that you don't know all of it.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't need to go all the way down the rabbit hole with it. Maybe just the top of it is fine.
Yeah.
For now.
And whatever you
Yeah.
can possibly do, like whatever's possible for you. That's definitely the key.
Yeah.
And also the principles of non-violence that, you know, the West Australian Forest Alliance was kind of founded on, and the community campaigners that have been doing direct action for forest protection for, you know, decades. Those principles apply like subtly and sort of subconsciously in all the work that we do. So the idea of shame is a violent
Right.
communication idea, and the idea of belittling or disempowering somebody, or the principles of non-violence work through into the ways that we take action, and the way that we, you know, the West Australian Forest Alliance is a community. Like I like to call it like a community. That's how I refer to it when I'm talking with all the people that are involved. We really, like, there's a lot of support that goes on, and the affinity that we have when we work together is quite personal. You know, people come into my home and drink cups of tea and do handstands every Monday while we pack team kits and count T-shirts and data entry. Like, we listen to each other on a personal level, and also about, we have that, make that space for the grief around climate grief and, you know, biodiversity loss, and we talk about these things, and we accept that this is part of being in the movement, is that, you know, there is going to be mental, emotional health breakdown in doing this work, and it's absolutely the way that it has been and will continue to be, and will probably get worse. Yeah. So we create a space for holding that just by our nature, and the people that we work with understand that compassion and understand that that's what's needed. Yeah.
I think, grief is the word, isn't it?
Grief is the word.
Because you look upon the destruction.
Yeah. And it's absolutely devastating.
And it's devastating, and it is loss.
Yeah. It's loss.
So it is grief.
And the grief is, you know, doubly, triply, or whatever, compounded, because it's not just in this moment loss. It's loss for future generations. And that loss for future generations is going to be, you know, exponential compared to the current loss that we're experiencing. And that grief is, you know, even deeper. For those of us who are parents,
before, and grief, you know, what will come in the future.
In the future, for the people not yet born. That's very big for a lot of people to hold. And we understand that as, you know, activists and climate activists. It's part of who we are. And for me personally, it's part of my driving force. Like, that grief that I feel, and, you know, less rage now. I used to get really like, oh my goodness, it's just like...
We'll come to rage in a minute.
But now it's more like, underneath that rage is always, for me, grief, personally.
Yes.
And that grief, if I can channel that into taking action, then I feel so empowered. I said it before, you know, I feel so like there's something that I can do, and I can see a way forward, given my own personal circumstances and what I can achieve. And together as a community, like when we all do our little bits, we end up with this movement that's so powerful.
Yes.
You know, because you need the people who write the letters. You need the people who are going to go and deliver the leaflets. You need the people who are going to cook the meal for the premiere of the film. You need the people who are going to collect raffle prizes and donations. You need the businesses who put their stuff in the cafes. You need, you know, the beekeepers talking about this. You need, everyone is needed. It doesn't matter how you show up. That's my favourite thing to say. Everyone is needed. Doesn't matter how you show up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, to another point you just mentioned before, when you were talking about grief, the recognition that, how do I put this? You almost are on a hiding to nothing or you always are on a journey to a bit of an emotional breakdown at some point, because unless we get to such a radical systematic change, and we'll probably come into this when I ask you the question about how you influence decision makers in a minute, but I think we have to have the recognition that currently we have these commercial entities which are born out of a period of enlightenment and rationalization where it's winners and losers, and the game is set up with a set of rules based on extractive economies, and until such time as we figure out how to replace all of that, we continue to have this thought perspective or this action perspective that's just gained a ridiculous momentum that's, some may say it's out of control. That will continue to happen, and it's not necessarily the people in it, it's the whole structure of the power that continues to go, and until such time as that's put to one side, you are going to head towards a bit of probably an emotional breakdown more than a mental breakdown. Is that how you'd see it?
Both. They're intrinsic, and you see it in the young children. You know, in the the students and who are realizing what the future holds for them, and there's an emotional breakdown and there's a mental illness attached to that, and that there is a trend, and there will be a need for, counsellors and psychologists who are especially trained in dealing with climate grief.
Yes.
And I would like to say that it's important to have that grief, and it's important to feel that grief and sit with that grief and be uncomfortable in that. And there's a lot, these are my personal opinions, there's a lot of ignoring the stuff that doesn't feel right and pushing it away and just getting on with things and not feeling it, not being with it, not sitting with it.
Well,
regular
listeners of the show probably know exactly what I'm going to say next, which is I have an emerging hypothesis, because it's turned up in the last several interviews, but it's come up again, is that grief is an appropriate response to what's going on in the world.
Absolutely.
I'm coming to this place where much of our mental and emotional health issues are not a problem with the individual. The individual's fine. No. They're an appropriate response to a world that's not going in a healthy, productive.
And if you're not having that response of grief right now, then you're not paying attention.
That's more concern.
That's more of a concern. You're not paying attention. You're not living in what is actually the reality right now.
Yeah.
And that's concerning, is that I think that it's to be celebrated if you're able to connect, if you're able to see what's happening and connect with the grief, because you're far more along the journey to doing something about it and making change and being part of the change if you can first do that. If you can first see what's happening and then feel the grief and use that grief, it's an energy for change.
Yes.
It's a powerful tool. It's there for a reason. Grief exists in us to motivate us to do something. Especially that feeling of injustice that comes with grief.
Yes.
That's the real motivator for me. That climate justice, being that this is not fair on people that have done nothing, absolutely nothing towards creating this problem.
Yes.
And that sense of injustice for me is like a real driving force.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned rage earlier on. How have you come to live with that? Because as you disappear into the, it's almost like the swamp of emotions, acknowledging is the way out. But part of that navigation, particularly if you've gone into the depressive parts, is anger's an appropriate transitional emotion at times.
Yeah.
So how did you deal with rage?
I dealt with rage by, usually it was a triggered response in an interaction that I'm having with somebody.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, not necessarily, or in reaction to not necessarily somebody that I knew or an interaction that I'm having personally, but just like this, how dare you, you know, that feeling of like, how dare you make those decisions on behalf of all of us, you know, that kind of rage. And that for me, there's a few steps in that process in my mind is, firstly, that compassion is a big part of it for me, and understanding that if I take responsibility for what I can do in my own life, then that somehow diffuses the rage because it puts the power back in my own hands.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't have that. I don't have that rage anymore for that person because I'm focused on what I can do in my own area of influence. And that really, really helps. But that compassion also, especially on a campaigning one-to-one level, you know, if you're at a stall and somebody comes up to you and says, oh, well, you know, like somebody shared, like one of our amazing volunteers shared with me yesterday, somebody said to him in passing at a stall, oh, well, you know, that's just the way it is, isn't it, mate? Too bad, too sad kind of attitude. And it's just, you know, firstly, my response to that was like, that guy's not part of our movement and we don't need him.
Yeah.
We need the people that get it
Yeah.
and want to work with us.
Yes.
And you know what? It's gone, for me, campaigning has gone way past that point of trying to convert people.
Yes.
If you're not already converted, you're getting left behind and we're going to move on without you.
Yes.
We don't actually need everyone to be on side to make mass change or to create mass
sort
movements.
Of 5-10%.
Right? It's even less than that. So it's a really small amount. You don't need that many people to, you know, make a revolution, really.
Yeah. No.
So, and those people, if I personally put my energy into trying to change their mind, I am going to get stuck in that negative feedback loop. And I'm going to get stuck in my own emotions and it's going to be super triggering for me. That's my personal experience. I'd rather just say,
and you're on a hiding to nothing there, aren't
right.
you?
I'd rather just say, have a lovely day. Maybe just check us out on the website.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah. When you arrive at the awakening, we'll be here for you.
Let us know if you want to get involved later. You know.
Yeah.
I don't engage in trying to convert people anymore personally. I'd rather put my energy into people who are like, yes, I'm on board. What's next? Let's go.
Yes.
That's where the power, that's where the change lies. And it's not about just doing what's positive. It's about go where the energy's flowing, like where it is, just use that momentum, work with that. Yeah.
I suppose another area of, you know, trauma, grief, rage in this is that, without getting all Carl Jungian on it, is that as you look at what is happening to the trees, your projection out onto what is happening to the trees in the forest is a direct mirror of what's happening to us as we wake up every day and get shepherded off to work and get extracted.
Yeah. And when you see, like, I don't know if you've ever been in a clearfell coop or seen machinery operating.
No.
But when you're on the ground and you can hear it and you can feel it in your bones and in your heart, it's absolutely devastating.
Yes.
And that, for me, it's less about the reflection. It's more like we feel this. Like it's a felt thing between all beings on this planet. Like it hurts.
Yes.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether you're a human or an animal or a plant or whatever. Like it's all part of that same feeling. And it's,
I think, I guess the point I was trying to make
is different to the point you were trying to make. But
it does hurt, and there will be that base level. I think it probably hurts that bit more because as you watch what's happening, it's us that are humans that are doing that to the forest, but it's us humans that are doing it to ourselves as well.
We're stuck in some of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too bad, too sad.
Yeah. And you know, the power really lies in working together for me. Like being around
Communitas.
being around the people that are committed to changing the paradigm and living the change of the paradigm in everyday actions.
Yeah.
And having these, difficult conversations. That's
like we're doing
now is absolutely that's the way forward. If we put all the power in corporations to make change to their regulations, if we hand over all our power to governments to make the right laws and decisions and policies,
proxy it out,
just like it's up to them, they should be doing it, then we lose our power to make change. We handed it all over. It's far more empowering to go, they're going to do what they're going to do, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make sure that what that is makes a big difference. Not just in my life, but in the lives of people around me. And that includes, taking care of people, and being available for people, showing up for people when they need it, in their whatever, their climate grief or their day-to-day shit, just the day-to-day shit of having to fucking turn up to work every day and do that.
Being extracted.
Being an extractor.
Yeah. Or being extracted. Yes.
Or both simultaneously.
Yes. So how...
I'm really enjoying this conversation, by the way.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Is it... Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt your thought process.
No,
not
at all. All right, then what is it you're enjoying about this conversation so far?
Well, I'm just enjoying being able to just really express freely, a bunch of stuff that, my thought patterns around the kinds of campaigning, that we do, and like the depth of thought that I have around it. That's really refreshing.
And I think...
rather than just what are the tools that you use and the strategies that you have and the who are the key people and
I wanted to bring an almost an inner world perspective to it, or inner world journey to it, because it like I said, it can be overwhelming, and then people don't want to look stupid, people don't want to look daft, and so sometimes it's easier just to go, I just won't say anything then, than asking the question or saying like, I'm really angry, but I'm confused, and I've got this other feeling which I can't quite place, and I've had it before. Oh, that's grief. All about this, and acknowledging that, so then you can move to the next place.
Yeah.
Because we can't engage in cognitive and strategic thinking if we haven't processed the emotion that sits beforehand. You can't move from one to the other.
Oh, I'm useless if I haven't worked out my stuff before I try and do something,
And that's just
like,
contrary to what people think. That is that's a human pattern.
Yeah.
That's part of the human map of loss.
It's everywhere, because we can't sit with the stuff. Can't sit with our stuff, be with our stuff.
Yes. So like tell ourselves a story or avoid it or
go to work.
Yeah.
Take substances.
Yeah. Get busy. Everyone's favourite. Busy.
My personal downfall.
Busyness, the crack of the modern day person. It's super addictive. What have you been up to recently? Busy. Really?
Yeah.
Why'd you do that, you mug? So the next question. The next sort of question I wanted to ask is, coming out of, the personal experience, how do you begin to approach or influencing decision makers and the world around this? So we've always gone from the inner journey to now the outside part of it.
Let's again say it's a multi-prong approach. Definitely first and foremost.
Yes.
And again, that there are lots of different, tools that are used. I don't really like using the word tools, the approaches.
Yeah.
And that's of a natural consequence. It's not a deliberate, we need these key ingredients to make a movement work and be able to make these decision makers stand up and listen. I mean, there is a bunch of those, but in the work that we do, it's far more grassroots. It's far more like using what energy there is and using what people come to the table and using what we have to affect change rather than, I mean, there's definitely strategies. But so, for example, for me, my personal favourite is definitely civil disobedience and direct action.
Yes.
I think for me that...
so let's be clear.
Yeah.
What does civil disobedience and direct action actually mean? And also, while we're coupling it in there, what does non-violence mean as well, all at the same time?
So non-violent direct action is getting in the way, putting your own personal body on the line to stop work, stop somebody from doing something. So that could be chain yourself to a tree. Yeah. It can also be disruptive, which is more the civil disobedience side of things. So you could have a flash mob at the train station and it's a big fun dance, and then at the end you're handing out flyers and you've disrupted people's day. And it's by nature non-violent because you're not harming anyone, you're not using abusive language, you're not damaging property, and you are showing up with compassion and seeing the humanity in the person that you're, stopping. So, for example, if you're at in a forest and you're wanting to stop the workers, there's no animosity towards the workers. There's very much a peaceable approach around, I get it, this is hard for you, it's your job, you need to pay the bills, you're a human, and
you're driven within the system.
Yeah, and I hear you, this is, and I hear your anger towards us, and I feel that this is really hard for you, and I'm not moving.
Yes. Yeah. I recognise you, and I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not doing the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different ways in...
I'm not here to fuck up your individual day.
No.
I'm just here.
I'm just here, and I'm not moving.
Yes.
So it's basically, being immovable a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And that in a forest situation can be, sitting down in a road and stopping a truck, or it can be chaining yourself, locking yourself onto a truck. It can be creating some kind of, blockade device like a tripod or a dragon where you dig a big, cement barrel into the ground and lock yourself into the cement barrel so that it can't be moved. A tree sit, and that makes the workplace dangerous and they have to stop work. Or you can just show up in the bush and kind of, play camo, and just, they know you're in there, so they can't work because they're endangering your life. So you just don't move, and then when they come to try and find you, you're just sort of move around a little bit. Yeah, there's all sorts of different techniques in terms of actual stopping work in forest blockade. And I mean, there are some incredibly creative humans, not just here, obviously all over the world, that have done some incredible things. And, there's things that are disruptive, again, like, dropping banners and flyering and stickering and, all of that kind of stuff, doing paste ups and things. And then there's the more creative actions where you, disrupting things. Like, for example, I showed up to a FPC, the Forest Products Commission, were tendering out a bunch of forest, basically. They were calling it timber, but it was basically thousands and tens of thousands of hectares of forest they were tendering out to a buyer. So I turned up to the buying forum and sat through the whole presentation of the tender application process. And then at the end, I stood up and disrupted the meeting and offered FPC a giant check for $1 million to buy back all the forests. And that's another way of that's another way of doing non-violent direct action or civil disobedience, and being disruptive in that way that disrupts the way that people think. Yeah. Disrupts their day. Yeah. Yes. And what happens in those blockades?
Which I kind of like.
Yeah.
Because, well, A, it needs that, but B, we have these behaviours and patterns and ceremonies and things like that, the tendering process, and why not just go and disrupt it?
Yeah, why not? And maybe someone in that room will think something a little bit differently after that.
As a result.
And you never know what effect that's going to have.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, something like that makes a bunch of the community laugh, and it's fun, you know.
Yeah,
It's
and
a good,
takes things less seriously.
Yeah, and it's also just a fun thing to be a part of. So, but it specifically in terms of like what influences decision makers and the context of non-violent direct action.
Just before that, what are the decisions you're trying to influence?
Yeah.
I suppose that's a...
Technically,
Yeah.
there's a forest management plan, and it's a 10-year plan, and it's due to begin to be reviewed in the middle of this year. And by the middle of 2023, there'll be a new 10-year forest management plan
For the state.
for the state.
Yeah.
And that document governs the entire way that forests are managed, and it decides what forests get logged, it decides how much, what contracts are signed, it decides
Sets the plan.
all the regulations and procedures around the management of forests. And what we want to influence is decision makers to turn that into a forest conservation plan,
Yes.
and to transition the contracts and the workers into the plantation sector and into farm forestry, 100%. Yeah, and that takes investing, because we don't want to be then buying old growth and native timber from Indonesia to replace our Karri and Jarrah.
Yeah.
We have to come up with a sustainable timber plan.
Yes.
And we have to do that locally and provide for our own needs locally, as even just that we don't want to be shipping stuff halfway around the world,
No, to get
we're in a
there.
climate crisis,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
so
yeah.
as long as if it's
Just recognising we do have a need for timber.
right, we do. And we also can create jobs. The Forest for Life transition plan creates like up to 900 jobs in the region.
Yeah.
And currently, and already, plantation timber is 90% of the market anyway.
Yes.
So it's really not difficult to do. So it's the key decision that we want to be made is that during this draft process, they're drafting up the phase out or the very complete quick transition of the native timber sector.
So that would be like
They finish up the contracts.
Yeah.
They don't renew any contracts.
Yeah. So that would be the ultimate decision
Yeah.
that you'd like to be influencing at this point in time.
That's right. Yeah, at this point in time. And that means, the two ministers that are responsible for creating that document are, they're Dave Kelly, Minister for Forestry, and Amber Sanderson, the new Environment Minister and Minister for Climate Action.
Right.
Yeah, Amber Jade Sanderson. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those two ministers are responsible for, their departments are responsible for writing up the forest management plan. And there is a submissions process that will happen this year, and there'll be a submissions process when the actual draft is released in the middle of next year.
Right.
And that's the opportunity for stakeholders to be involved. And right now, there'll be inquiry panels that are set up to look at those documents, and now's the time to be influencing those decision makers to put key conservationists and people from other sectors of the industries that rely on forests to have a voice in those inquiries. So the beekeeping industry and the tourism industry and the recreation industry and even the food and wine industry, and relies so heavily on that southern forest region, and the nature of that region is so intrinsically part of the value and the sale value of what people all the businesses down there. If we didn't have the forests down there, then people would be way less likely to go.
Yes.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to see representatives from those industries in this inquiry process and influencing, that new forest conservation plan.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the key body of work that we're trying to influence.
Yes.
And there are so many ways that we will influence that, and direct action is one of them.
Yes.
Yep. And having conversations with key decision makers on an individual level. You can do that. I can do that. Students can do that. Anyone can do that. They're your elected representative, and it's their job to listen to you, whatever concern you have, and whatever you want to see happen, it's their job to make that happen.
Yes.
That's what they're paid to do. That's what they got elected for. So we have to utilise that power. It's a very, very powerful tool.
Well, that system, yes.
And a lot of people are terrified of going to meet their local member of parliament because they're like, well, I don't know how many hectares of forests get cut down. I can't possibly remember all the statistics. I can't talk confidently and eloquently about this.
Yes.
And I'm going to get shot down in this meeting because I don't know anything about forests. What's the bet that this minister has no idea about forests as well? Probably. Yes. And also, it's irrelevant because all you have to do is show up and say, I want forest protected. That's what I want.
Yeah.
End of story.
Mm.
That's what I want to say. That's what I want you to do. Mm. Just find a way. That's your job.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to do it, go and ask the WA Forest Alliance because they've worked it all out.
Yeah. They've thought it through.
They've thought it through. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful tool.
Yes.
And empowering, part of what we do is empower people through having conversations like this to actually use that tool that's available to them. Yeah. Yeah.
That's probably one of the most powerful things you can be doing at this time.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Get in contact with your local member and talk about the importance of forests. And you don't even need to say why. It's just that they're important and they need to be protected. Yeah. And we can support you if you want to have all the facts and figures and you want to leave the minister with a document that says these are the reasons why. Just we've got all that stuff ready for you to go, so you can go and feel, and we're doing a bunch of trainings around that too. So those people who really do need to feel like they have
the
answers,
knowledge and the
we'll
point.
Provide that training.
Because it's there's just there's still this bemusing part to me of
tell me
of we've talked about the economic benefits of forests, right? And you talked about the beekeeping industry, the tourist industry, and this, that, and the other. And we've also talked about changing the forest management plan to a conservation plan, and that all makes complete sense to my rational brain. But the bit that's missing is, and again, this is another question that turns up in my podcast, is where have the grown-ups gone, right? That just go, no, we just shouldn't mess around with this stuff. We shouldn't. I don't want to hear your business plan. I don't want to hear your economic benefits. I don't want to hear all of that. This is just something we shouldn't play with.
Yeah.
And it's, I know that we have to play the game and pitch it at the level, because there are people who have been invested with the responsibility and the power to make decisions which impact the forest and many other things. But then that system in and of itself has its own individual drivers and things like that, which means that the right longer term decision doesn't always happen. And one of the things, I would love at the moment to get somebody who we could to have a discussion with on the podcast just about whether politics and democracy is actually working. Given the fact that we have these 4-year cycles, and we have human beings in these jobs, and like anybody, particularly now during COVID, when jobs can be scarce. Right, not so much at the moment, but people will do things to keep hold of their job because they want to get paid, because they want to put bread on the table and they want to keep the lights on and everything. So people will do things which are contrary to their better nature and their own conscience, because you just have to do it. So the question that keeps arising is, when are the grown-ups going to show up that go, right, guys?
I actually have.
You see?
Yeah, and you know what?
I myself have been on a journey in this conversation.
Yeah.
Through the emotive part, listening to what I can do.
Yeah.
Now I'm at the point of, we have to have space to even recognise that point that I've just said.
Yeah. I think that actually, I personally have underestimated the ability for West Australian members of Parliament to be empathetic and to listen.
Right.
And actually, in my experience over the last 3 years, I have experienced when we do have those, when we've built those relationships, we are having these conversations, and they are grown-up conversations, and they have found ways to put protections in, and there have been many inroads, even in the last 3 years, but over the course of this whole movement.
That's super reassuring to hear.
You know, that there are always doors open and there are always listening ears. We just need to keep having those conversations.
Turn up and
turn up and do it. And the thing that, you know, basically, if 25,000 people stood on the doorstep of Parliament House and demanded that forests be protected, they would be protected like that.
Yes.
And that's you and me. And the 25,000, you know, the 25,000 people out there alongside us. It literally takes that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, back in England, we have just seen the equivalent of 25,000 people stand up and go, no, the top 6 football clubs cannot disappear into a European Super League. The fans turned up and went, outrage. No, it's not happening. Guess what? Stopped.
Yeah. It's very, very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And that's part of that direct action. You know,
providing overwhelming feedback.
Yeah, it's just that you have to show up no matter what you're doing. Stop what you're doing, show up and get in the way and use your voice. And that the power of mass movement is something that I fully prescribe to, and that I'm, you know, and there will be a time this year when we're going to be calling on 25,000 people to gather for the forests. We're planning that for November. So there will be a time, and you know, everyone needs to show up.
Yes.
And then it'll happen. It just takes like everyone being there at the same time in the same place. You know, and it doesn't happen in a silo or a vacuum. You know, it's on the back of, you know, 40 years of campaigning.
Oh, yes.
It's on the back of, you know, everybody, you know, the nanas stitching leaves and, you know, whatever else everyone's doing, all those little things. It's all part of the movement that gets 25,000 people there. The film is going to get 25,000 people there.
Yes.
All the other things that we've been doing in campaigning is the stuff that motivates people to actually show up and brings to light the issue, educates, brings awareness, and raises the money so that we can keep building the awareness, you know?
Yes.
All of that is part of it.
Perpetuate.
Yeah. And then we end up with that. It is actually the only thing. And you know, imagine if we had an active blockade in the forests every single week. If people just said, I'm not going to show up for work, I'm just going to go and camp in the bush and refuse to move. Every single time, that's bar one, 3 out of the 4 times we've set up a blockade in the last 3 years, the forest has been protected. Yeah. When we set up a camp in Lewin, it was there for 3 months, and the Lewin forest had started to be logged, and we rocked up on a Friday morning and the workers didn't show up, and they never showed up again. We were there for 3 months, sentry just keeping watch and witnessing, making sure. And then we got an announcement that not just Lewin forest, but all 2-tiered karri forests of that particular calibre there'd be a moratorium on the logging of those forests. And then, as a result of all the campaigning that we just did in the election period recently, the the announcement was made that those 2 tiered karri forests the moratorium will extend out to the forest management plan, so another 3 years. So those tens of thousands of hectares of karri forest, it's 6,000 hectares of karri forest are protected, and they will be written out of the forest management plan. We're fully confident of that. And that's, obviously, again, the blockade didn't happen in a vacuum, but it was the catalyst. Like, if we hadn't have shown up and stopped work that day and drawn attention to this beautiful forest and this issue, then we wouldn't have had that result. We needed everything, but I do believe in the power of standing up and refusing to move.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful message, because it's easy to be quite divided, individualised, and think, oh, there's nothing I can do. But to actually see that people come together, and then this was the result, and this was the impact of that, and it's tangible. That's a different story.
Yeah, 6,000 hectares of karri is rain making. That makes rain,
Yeah.
and it draws down tons of carbon.
Yes.
Tons.
Yeah.
And it is a home for, so many different species, from, the mycelium in the soil all the way up to the Carnaby cockatoos in the canopy,
Yeah.
the gazillion different species. And it's, it's got cultural heritage values. It's, they're the indigenous cathedrals. They're the spiritual places. They're just as culturally significant and sacred as, rock caves and ancient paintings, and they are like these. And that's what the Wadandi people, like Uncle Wayne and Zach Webb. That's what they say in the film. These are our ancestors, and this is our cultural belonging here. You're destroying the life force, is what Uncle Wayne says in the film. You're destroying the life force.
Right.
Yeah.
So, how is it being Shona Hunter, looking into the world like this so deeply? How does that impact you on a sort of day-to-day?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to acknowledge that there are
other
people in this organisation as well. And
I'm just asking you your journey.
Sure. And
not so much the journey to this point now, as
No.
you look into the world and you see this issue quite deeply. And then you probably see other things quite deeply as a consequence, because you have that capacity to. How does that weigh on you or play in your everyday being?
I think the most challenging, like when you talk about weight, that the most challenging thing for me is reconciling the level of investment that I put into this work. It detracts from my presence with my family, with the children that I'm trying to protect. And that's something that I struggle with a lot, is that, the amount of emotional energy that it takes to, do this work.
Yes.
And to...
It's not just turning up 9 to 5 and punching a ticket.
No, and it's not just... and the community work that's involved as well, like that grief support work, and that's supporting people and being available for people, and that, and also just, being a community organiser means that you have to be available after hours, because most of the people that you're working with are working, and they're working with you after they're working.
Yes.
Because they're incredible volunteers gifting their time. And so...
And they too have to go and earn a crust and put bread on the table.
Yeah, and, my kids don't ever want to see a forest blockade again. And it's...
God damn those forests.
Yeah, and it's just because it's taking up
Yeah.
their time with me and my presence with them. And they understand, like I've explained to them, why we do the work that we do. But that's probably the in terms of heavy weight and the most challenging part of what it's like being me and doing this kind of work. And it's ironic that I'm losing out on time with my kids because I'm trying to create a better future for them. That irony is definitely not lost on me.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
and I am mostly so I come alive with the work. Like, it's not something that brings me down, and I'm incredibly lucky that I have a sense of resilience, and I acknowledge that there are a lot of people out there that don't have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to carry this kind of load and this kind of work, and that I have, you know, that I have, I'm lucky, I guess.
Yes.
And that
you have the capacity.
I have the
you
capacity.
have the fitness.
And because
and the strength.
and because I have that privilege, I need to use it.
Yes.
And that's that sense of like, this is work that's important to me. This is what I'm here for.
Yes.
And I know that deeply. Like, this work is what I'm here for.
Yes.
And when we save the forest in 3 years' time, we'll move on to bigger things.
Yeah.
Right? It's just going to be. And
would it be time for Shane to put her feet up for a while?
Yeah. I do, you know, and I create balance. Like, I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of, I do have a lot of balance in my life. I do take care of myself.
You can't be serious all the time.
And one of those things too is like being paid fairly for this work.
Yes.
Is something that I'm always acknowledging, is that activists and campaigners are really underpaid and overworked, and they carry so much of this mental, emotional load. And there is this paradigm that's part of the capitalist neoliberal paradigm, that if you're doing something that's good, you don't get paid.
Yes.
And we have to break that shit down.
Yes.
Because it's enabling the extractive economy to continue. Because capitalists love it that we're all fucking burnt out and underpaid.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, imagine if we were all getting paid fairly for what we were doing.
Yeah. And we're all doing stuff that was regenerative and progressive.
Right? Yeah. They'd be losing, actually. And there's this notion in this kind of in the environmental sector and the movement, that if you take money for what you do, you're a sellout, or that you'll become corrupted, or that you're not really entitled to it, and that you should be doing the work for free, for the love of it, because, that's how it is. That's just that we're stuck in that. And I'm constantly having conversations with people around, if we were getting paid, not just fairly, but at the same rate of some of these company CEOs, imagine the capacity for change that we would have. And even if I didn't need all that money for my personal lifestyle, imagine what capacity I would have if I could reinvest that back into regenerative economies, back into, employing other people to do the same thing that I'm doing, and to build movement. And we can turn the economic ship around by reinvesting where our money goes and paying good people to do good things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so that's part of me taking care of myself, is advocating for paid activism, paid campaigning, because then I can take care of my family. I'm not struggling. I'm not on the bones of my ass.
And then strangely enough, it can then become a 9-to-5 job with space for the family at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I have boundaries around the work that I do. I didn't in the beginning, but I've learnt now that in order for me to be sustainable in the work that I do, I've got to have clear boundaries around the work that I'm doing and what I can and can't do, and the times that I'm starting. And obviously there's flexibility because of the nature of the work, and it's different hours. But I stopped overworking and being underpaid, because I realised that I was going to get burnt out, and then I'd be good for fucking nothing.
Yes.
I'd be good there's no way I could do the work.
Pulled in, chewed out.
Yeah. So I don't want that to happen to anyone who's doing good work.
No.
The people that are doing good work deserve to be paid the most to support them, so they can go and get the healthcare that they need to keep doing the work.
Yeah. Don't necessarily have to flog yourself.
So they can pay, childcare, and they can afford a cleaner to come and clean their house
Yes.
so that they can focus on the work.
Yes.
That kind of stuff, like, it does make a difference.
It does.
Yeah.
So the last question I ask all my guests,
Yeah.
it's a hypothetical one, but it's always fun. If I could just slow everyone down for 5 or 10 minutes, and then Shona could upload a question into the collective consciousness, so everyone just sat, chilled, and reflected on your question, what would it be?
It has to be, I don't know who said it, but it is a quote.
Yeah.
It has to be, what makes you come alive? Go and do that.
Yes.
Not what you need to do, what you think you need to do, what you're being told to do, but what makes you come alive? That question is my favourite question. Yeah.
Awesome. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. It's been great.
Yeah?
Yeah, really.
Superb.
Yeah.
So if people want to reach out, where do they come to?
They come to the WA Forest Alliance, wafa.org.au, and join the team. There's a big fat button on a website.
Yeah.
Join in, click the button and fill in your details, and I'll be contacting you and asking you what's the thing that, draws you to this.
Yeah.
What's your particular thing? And also acknowledging that some people don't have a particular thing and they just want to get direction and just and we've got a plan for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Superb.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure.
Cool.
Really. Thanks.
Thanks.